watching NotesIn9.
Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 173, Getting Started with Servlets. Finally. Okay, I believe this is a very important show. I've been trying to get this topic on for quite a while, and I'm really excited to get a great show on demonstrating how to start using your servlets or creating servlets inside the XPages world. And why do you care about servlets? And REST services is also, I guess, could be kind of lumped in there, I think, is because everything we've done so far, for the most part, is inside XPages and inside JSF. And I think in the XPages journey, we've learned a lot, and we're going to keep learning XPages. But we've learned, these things that work outside of XPages. We've learned HTML. We've learned some CSS, probably not too much on this show, but I'm sure you've picked some up. We've done some things with client-side and server-side JavaScript, so the basic JavaScript language. All these are transferable skills and things that work inside the bigger area of web development. Okay, but even now, everything still has been within the box that is XPages. So what the servlets and the REST services start to open the world is getting outside the box of XPages more and just exposing your data. And then that lets you use something like an accelerator or an Angular JS or maybe Swift on the iOS world or whatever to basically just call your servlet to interact with your data. And I believe you can even use other XPages too, but I'm more interested in the ability for non-XPages front ends, whatever they may be, to still be able to get to our Domino data and maybe still use the business logic that we've built up in Java or server-side JavaScript to some extent in XPages, because that's where the data is living in the Domino data store. And once you do that, once you have the ability to provide that data to an outside source, and that outside source is just talking to the API that you've created with your servlet, then you've got total freedom. So now you can use whatever front-end development platform you want, or, gosh forbid, you want to change out the Domino database and use something else, then you can move to any other database that provides, a servlet or a REST services API that you can control. So to me, in the journey of web development, this is really one of the last steps for the XPages developer to really take, to be able to provide their data to an outside source. And that's what kind of this show is getting at. Now, we're not going to use the data really from outside source other than a tool inside Chrome, but that's kind of where the direction is going. So again, I believe this is a very important topic, and I hope you like it. And I have a new contributor for this show. I believe is a new contributor. I've been talking for a long time, so it's kind of hard to remember. But his name is Eric McCormick, he's just an expert developer. I actually don't know where Eric came from. It's just like he just appeared one day, and the day he appeared, it's like he was here forever and the smartest guy in the room, just about. So he's an IBM Champion. He's done a lot of great blogging and stuff like that. He's only been developing XPages since 2011, but he's done Java longer. I'm pretty sure, I forget where he works, but he's like me. He's a customer, so that's always just great to see. He's on Twitter. There's at whatever that's supposed to be. That's his Twitter handle. He's got a couple different websites. He has a long blog series on these servlets and stuff like that. So I highly recommend you check that out. He's blogged about some other stuff as well too. Because again, he's not the typical XPages only developer, kind of like I am, but he's more like a true developer that uses XPages where it makes sense. So he's well worth listening to. I think this is a great demo, and I hope you like it.
Hello, I'm Eric McCormick. I'm going to be doing a video here on getting starting with servlets and then being able to implement them the way you would normally interact with, say, a managed bean. You may have seen me previously. I tend to banter a lot with Mark Roden or Dave Leedy on Twitter, and I tend to kind of develop a man crush on Jesse Gallagher, who's a pretty smart guy and has an excellent framework I suggest to check out. I have thieved and or adapted some of his components along with those of others who I've attempted to credit as able. And really what I'm trying to do is show that all the pieces are out there for getting started with servlets in this more industry standard way in Java, as opposed to relying on Domino data services, which don't hook into existing business logic as easily or enforce an additional set of rules. They're just the CRUD operations. And you've also may have heard about not wanting to use an X agent if you're able to, due to its quote-unquote baggage of the JSF lifecycle where it's not needed. X agents are still very useful if you need session assigner access to your NSF. But other than that, there's no reason you can't do what you're already doing in a servlet. It just takes a little bit of time to get set up. So, like I said, that's me. I tend to do a lot of tweeting. I have a blog I write. Hopefully already following the series. I am clearing the queue, as it were, so I can do a little bit of recording for this video and then continue on in the same file as I progress through the rest of the blog series. I've been with Domino XPages as a developer since 2011, and I've done various other Java and web development, both server stack and also front-end only, ever since college. And let's get started. What I have here is an adapted version of Tim Tripkini's How You Been application, which he put together for NotesIn9. The NotesIn9 video is an excellent video. It's a great way of understanding how to get started with a Java bean, which is really just a formatted Java object. And this is the way a lot of people in the Java world work, is with such objects. And the reason that I chose to use a modified version of that file is for simplicity. I'm running this locally. I have not installed OpenNTF Domino API. At work, I like to, but this is simplicity, like I said, and you can see I have basically 3 main classes I'll be interacting through, a couple utility classes, and otherwise I just have a model class and a space for a controller class for some of my business logic. And this is really highlighting the benefit of this approach. You can define your logic and your object format without the need for shoving it all in the markup layer, which is an X page. The markup layer is something that should be, in my opinion, a template, which is something I attempted to communicate a while back in my blog post on single page applications. It's a template with which you fill data. And if you keep it that way, that means that your long-term maintenance of your application becomes that much easier. You don't have to go filtering through what I refer to as spaghetti code, through many design elements, all looking for where is this definition, where is this check for this stage of workflow. And it's something that's real easy to get into if you do more than just a couple of lines in any of the SSJS blocks in your design elements. And if you take what should be a developer normal approach and try and shove any more complex logic into a script library, with SSJS it tends to get bulky. So I tend to take the why not use the Java stack for what it's meant for, to be a Java stack, and hopefully simplify your life by keeping things nice and tidy. So as you can see here, I have an application. I switched themes, I updated Bootstrap from that file. Like I said, I forked. I did a couple of other tweaks, and you'll see that I've already populated some documents into my view. This correlates to my houses view. And as you can see, I'm presenting in the view name of the house, description, and words. And as you can see, it fills out quite nicely. I can iterate through, and it's very straightforward. So if I click on one, I'm in a read-only view of this document. I have full viewing ability, and if I click edit, suddenly I'm able to edit everything. I can save or I can back out. And a new one is just the same form. So this is all very similar for what I believe to be a straightforward interface. So you can see I have 2 X-page design elements. I have my index, which is my view list, which is really a repeat, and it's all formatted out the Bootstrap 3-way. And then I have the house X-page, which is the form, as it were. And here you can see I am binding to the managed bean. And I'm not going to spend too much time on that because Quite honestly, I don't want to show you managed beans. Other more intelligent people have shown managed beans very successfully. They've made a great argument for why you should use Java for the advantages of Java in XPages. And what I'd like to do is show how you can bridge the gap to other systems, other platforms, and keep everything that you know about Java Beans and then just adapt one new thing on top of it. So I'm going to start with getting set up for our servlet. I should mention that most of these steps, at least on the early side, are things I've already blogged about before. As you can see, I have a series on my GitHub-based blog, which is great, by the way. I can blog in Markdown and makes managing relatively easy so long as you don't forget to preview a draft and then forget to move it back out of the post folder and back into drafts. So if you are ever looking for notes, a little bit longer explanation, I apparently have no problem filling my page full of text. I outline all these setup steps in my blog, and I will continue to be adding to the blog with a lot of the pieces that you'll see here in this video. And also should follow, for the most part, what my blog series is doing. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be starting up creating a servlet, and I'm not going to, like I did in my blog, I'm not going to actually write the servlet first. I'm going to start with defining the file that will let me create the connection to the servlet. So I'm going to go to my second post, which is implementation, and this is setting up the servlet factory. Started with defining the file for the definition for hooking your servlet factory into your actual servlet classes. It's best to actually switch over to Package Explorer. Now, as you can see here, I have two applications under source control projects in my Project Explorer, and we need to start with finding the code Java directory. And I'm going to be defining a folder, and inside of that folder will be another folder, and inside that second folder there will be a file. So if I go into New under the code Java, which is part of our Java build path, I select Folder. Next, I'm going to call this meta-inf, and inside that I'm going to create another folder called Services. Inside there I'm creating a file, and that is going to be called com.ibm.xsp.adapter.servletFactory. And this is where I can define, single line, the class name of the servlet factory I'll be using. It's not actually the servlet factory itself, so I'm going to call it something fitting. Let's actually capitalize and spell correctly. And that's it. Save, close. Now the only thing left for me to do is create the actual factory itself. So I'm going to close out there, create a new Java class. As you can see, it's fairly straightforward here. Now, the thing of note when doing this, which can trip people up, is that you may need to import, if you have not already done so in your workspace. To add the appropriate jar to your build path, you'll want to find it by going first into your project properties, going to Java build path, and under libraries here, you'll see I have it already added. It comes from the Notes Framework Shared Eclipse Plugins com.ibm.domino.xsp.adapter _ version relevant to the install version of Domino, and it gets a little bit lengthy, but once you're inside there, you'll find that it is called accordingly LWPD Domino Adapter, and this is what makes everything work. com.ibm. Designer XSP Adapter NSF. And as you can see, not the NSF, there's the other one. There's two. There's the NSF and the other one. As you can see, this one is what I'm looking for, the not NSF one, and that's what makes it work. I'm not actually certain why I was able to do the import earlier without having this in my build path. Previous versions I've run into where it was not available for import until I had added that jar to my project build path. Just know that you have to look for it, and as my blog post references, Sven Hasselbach has a very excellent post on where to find it and all that, and that's whose work I used as my own reference. Here, our class needs to implement iServlet factory, and this needs to be imported. And this is going to be coming from com.ibm.designer.runtime.domino.adapter. As you can see, it's throwing a complaint. I'm going to add my unimplemented methods, and as you can see, it has some to-dos for the auto-generated stubs, and I have a getServlet match and init. And this is where the rubber meets the road. Started with your servlet factory, you need to do a couple of things. Notice it needs to implement iServlet factory, which we've already done. It implements a couple of methods such as getServlet match and init. So in init, I'll start first actually. So property-wise, I'm defining two maps and setting a component module. The maps are for the classes and the names by which I'll be referring to these actual servlets we're invoking. The names is keyed off of the key of the name, what goes in your actual URI. So when you're talking about the NSF/servlet name that we're referencing, that's where this goes. And then it'll map with a description of it. And then by that same key in the servlet classes, we're mapping to the actual package and class name. So in init, I am putting, as you can see, houses with the house name of the servlet that we'll invoke. And then I'm also putting that into the names with a description of it. And then setting the module. The getWidget servlet has to do with the module, with creating a servlet actively when it's called. And the servlet match method is really what does the grunt work of comparing as it iterates through. So once it finds it's all good to go, I'll actually do something that, well, kind of do something with this actual exception that I'm catching for. But otherwise, you can see it's fairly straightforward. We're defining and setting what we can access as a servlet, and then we are actually getting them. So that being done, it's time to actually create the servlet itself. Actually creating the servlet, I'm going to follow the same approach that I concluded with in my blog post on the subject. There are basically three main flavors of servlets that you can more or less do. You can take a frameworked approach like Jesse Gallagher's Frostilicus XSP servlet, abstract XSP servlet. That's what I'm going to use. Or you can use a custom modification of the designer faceless servlet, which it uses. That would be this guy right here. And there's a benefit to doing this approach, and I'm using Jesse's approach because it automates a couple of the more tedious tasks involved. As you can see, it always marks the faces context response complete, releases it, and closes it. And this is very important to do. You can also see he's setting content type, but you can overwrite that in your actual servlet itself. Just think of this as being a default. As for the remainder, you could rock a straight HTTP servlet with doGet, doPost, doPut, doDelete methods, which lexically, that makes a lot of great sense because it's very, very readable. The problem is that as soon as you want to access anything that might be in memory in your application, relating back to faces context, that you will not be able to have that handle within your Domino servlet. So to conclude all this, I'm going to implement abstract XSP servlet. If you want the longer explanation, try my blog post. It's just the way I'm going to do it. And so the way I'm going to do things is I'm going to create a new class, and this is going to be my house servlet. And as you can see, it's going to be just fine. And I'm going to have it extend abstract XSP servlet, and as you can see, it requires it to be imported. And then once it's imported, we have to add our unimplemented methods. And you can see the do service here is what we're overriding. And this invokes the service aspect that the abstract XSP servlet class does. You can see we have a handle on a request, a response, or the HTTP servlet request and response varieties, the faces context, and we have our servlet output stream, which gives us everything we're looking for to get started. Inside my doService method, you can see I've set up a response type as being application JSON. This will be true for each of my methods. And because I like to keep things clean, and I had to do some hacky non-string based switching, which Java 6 does not allow for. That is available in Java 7, so I'm very much looking forward to that and a number of other things in the Java 7 JVM update, which is was remarked as being on its way when we were at IBM Connected this year. So I'm basically establishing a handle on the method type of the request that we're receiving, and then if it's a GET, I perform the do get in my house collection, and really this is just another place where I'm shoving all my actual grunt work so that the main servlet can really just point me to what I'm doing. So I have one for get, post, put, and delete, like you would have with the nomenclature for an HTTP servlet. And I also have a handle unexpected verb, and so verb or action, so get, post, put, and delete are what I'm looking for. And this basically says if someone tries to pass me, say, a patch, I'm going to say return an error and then give them the correct response code for unhandled method, which I believe is a 403, and then possibly an explanation of what to look for or documentation on the actual API that I have, either for internal use by myself and others or just to taunt people, one or the other. Now, if I go over to my house collection class, you can see I'm passing in the parameters for the request, response, basis context, and the output stream. I'm doing the same thing, I just wanted to keep it clean, like I said. So right here you can see I'm setting status 200. I have some boilerplate stuff in here, so it's returning regular text plain. I will be generating some JSON with this, which you'll see in just a moment. And then I have the same for, that's delete, here's get, post, and put. And then my unexpected verb, I apparently need to finish implementing. But I stand corrected from earlier. A 403 is a request not allowed, whereas a 405 is a method not allowed. And the 405 requires that you also include an allow header with a comma-separated list of the methods that it does allow. So this concludes my handle unexpected verb method. This will go ahead and set the response to 405, and it adds the header of allow to get, post, put, and delete, the verbs that I'm expecting. Before we move on, let's take a moment to talk about the house collection responses that I'm building. This deals more specifically with the responses. I've covered it previously in my blog. I want to make sure it's explicit here. In my do get and my do post, for handling the responses, I have to build out my application JSON. JSON being a serialized notation format for what can be reparsed into the client-side JavaScript version of an object. So for myself, I am building out a base object, which is a hash map string object. Inside that I put an array list containing the individual entries as hash map string. I could do hash map string object if there were more complex structures. However, mine happen to be simple key values off of the view columns. I've updated my view underlying to include more of the fields, in fact all of them. And what this does is I could provide a more complete individual record API off of the root view. This is a technique. This is more so that I can show off how to do either approach. So down here, my commented out block, I was just doing the 4 values for the basic view equivalent in my page, and I was just putting the name, description, words, and the unit into the object. This does a more complete one by iterating the column names off of the view, and across the size of that content, I build in the column values for that individual document, and I iterate their values into a hash map and add that to my array list. And then I keep adding into that, then put my response into the data array property of my root object. And because I've made it this far, I then put my error false in. And you'll see that to create the actual response using the JSON way, I'm creating a new handle on a JSON object, and I'm performing a out.print because ultimately JSON, when transmitted, is the serialized, aka string-like model. So G to JSON from an object of my response. I set my response status. I also am including my allow headers here. And because it's a simple get, that's all there is to it. You'll also see I catch my exceptions, set my status to 500, and I perform a much more simple string encoding of my response actual message. And this has a error true error message of my exception because that's what I'm allowing it to be. This is basic. This is JSON generation. The IBM Commons way is to provide JSON generator to JSON using a JSON Java Factory instance with the response. It does the same thing. Those are probably negligible. In the post, things get different because for the first time, we're doing something more with the data before we actually perform any sort of a save. So post reads in the data in the request. You'll see here I establish a input stream off of the request. I'm using the Apache Commons IOUtils to string off of the input stream reader. And again, here's the IBM Commons way of doing things. There's that JSON Java Factory again, get the instance handle. I reflect a JSON Java object off of from the JSON parser with the factory and the request string, which we already have up here. I can then have a house model and I can read in my properties. The downside of the IBM Commons way of doing this is right here, this get JSON properties and the get properties methods only expose an iterator of strings for the keys. So that way I have to do a while loop as opposed to reading in, as you'll see elsewhere in my source code, that it actually can be a for string key in my get properties method using the JSON way. So that being the case, I read in since I have my string version of it, I perform a reflection to a generic map string object. I could reflect this directly to the class of my house model. However, because I have extra notations of things like load, query save, that kind of a thing, it gets in the way, and because they don't exist in the JSON object, I won't be able to correctly create it. So here I'm performing a from JSON using the JSON class object, using the string and the hash map class directly. This lets me build up my map of string object, and that's pretty straightforward and safe. It also has the advantage of using a object value, which lets me have more complex structures, like I said. So here I do my for map entry of string object pair in my entry set. This is the for var in, list equivalent like you find in JavaScript. However, this is the Java way of doing it. Entry set is iterable like this. Pretty handy. This way I just read in my key and value and keep on moving. So when this save happens, you would expect to see some sort of validation. The way that I'm implementing uses the abstract document map. And this, as you can see, has a couple of things: get unit, load, get form name, and a couple of things that override, like get form name, query save. Now the query save, if I don't override it, inherits from here. I happen to be overriding it in my document model, but let me just show you here. Here it just returns true. And the reason that is because if I go to the actual save method, which is not overwritten, it has a if query save, then perform the remainder to perform the actual document saving. So the result gets set after that happens, and only if it's successful does it actually return true from the save method, meaning that in my actual house model, that my query save, the validation requirements should go right here before returning whatever success handle I have created. So, for example, I set it to false in advance, perform logic of making sure, say, everything's not blank, making sure that certain values are unique, that kind of a thing, and then I return true. For simplicity's sake right now, I'm leaving this as is. It conveys the message. Then, over my collection, I can also get a handle on the actual save event and continue. But as you can see, all that really will change is whether or not I set my response status to a successful one or not. So, boolean save success. And then I can perform this. Move my location header up here with that, and perform my else logic. And here, I'm performing this manually right now. This would be a malformed response. So with a malformed response, an error 400 of a bad request is the appropriate response. And as you can see, that with that in place, I can add my header of what the allow methods are and continue as normal. That handles my collection. So that's what I do in a post for an entire brand new object. And as you suspect by now, I hope that the same query save validation requirements can apply to anywhere I create a house model object. So with the actual house record, anytime I talk about doing a put, that also applies. So we're covering our bases. Now that I've shown how to complete the life cycle of our servlet and for both the collection and the records or resources, my end state is actually to be using a front-end framework to implement the UI and client-side or browser-based application behavior. So we're going to switch over now and have a look at how to do this from our client side. So as you can see, the XPage itself that I was using to show and reflect what's going on is here. It's loaded, local web previews running. What I'm going to do actually is open up Advanced REST Client app, and this is a Chrome extension that you can get out of the Chrome Web Store. And all this really is, it's a lot like Postman, you may have heard of, but basically you type in your URL, you select the method you want, you can add headers, and it does a good job of displaying and interacting with what you're dealing with. And like Chrome's dev tools, the body gets prettified. So as you can see, I'm just going to get the collection of houses. You can see I get a 200 OK response, took 450 milliseconds, request and response headers, and here's my response body. So as you can see, main object, error false, data array of objects with the description, name, words, and unit. So that's more than enough for me to get a handle on a unit, and then also do the same thing for an individual record. But I want to finish demonstrating the other method we allow at the collection level here, the post. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a sample of an object which will represent a document we're going to create, and we'll put that here in the payload, specified it's a post. And this should come across actually as application JSON, send. I get 201 created, and you'll see my response headers, my header of location shows where they got created at. And location is one of the best things to include when you create something new, and it's a strong recommendation if you're using 201 as a response method, or response code rather. So now if I do a get, and I do my get against the collection / unit of what I just created, we'll see that. I'm going to show that we see it here in the view, and that's just with a partial refresh. We're seeing, hey look, a new document. That's exactly what I was looking for. So if I do a get at that fully qualified URL, I get the actual document wrapped inside of values with the unit and edit mode true. So you can see it's working. So the other methods we have for the record are put for update in whole or in part, and then also delete. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change my description. We can see it says this. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Paste that into the object, and I'm going to change that to there. So basically, arbitrary edit, perform a send, 200 OK. The object got sent, and there's not really a congratulations we updated. There is a status code for we'll continue the processing on the server, but we successfully received. It's just that's for more of a long running item. And you can see here, if I go ahead and open up, not that one, you'll see that the description is changed and is reflected. So now, for the last thing, I'm going to go ahead and perform a delete against that endpoint, perform a send, no data, but I did get a 200 OK. So now, if I perform a get on that same URL, it's showing, and I should change my record method to fail because I didn't actually find it. It definitely does not contain any value contents, and it no longer shows in the view. To handle the behavior of trying to access a document by unit or record by unit, that doesn't exist. We just deleted this one, as you can see, and the way it was previously it was returning a empty set of values for a model object. Now that wasn't actually saved anywhere. It was instantiated during the record method. It was just full of nothing because when performing the load off of that unit key, it was filling no values because it didn't exist. So instead of returning a status code of 200, I'm going to return a 404 that everyone's familiar with for not found. And you can see that pretty obviously, that record no longer exists anymore. What I did is I implemented in my house record class a method to check if the unit is valid that I've received in that portion of the servlet. And then if it is, I continue with normal operations. And if it isn't, I, instead of going to a do get, do put, or do delete, go into handle record not found. And all this does is set response status to 404. To see that in action, I perform a send, 404 not found. That is descriptive enough. It's now ready for use by my client-side application. To close out, thank you for watching. I hope this has helped. I'm not done yet, but I can also tell you that there'll be a couple more blog posts to come specifically regarding converting X-agent logic into a proper servlet, but also how to complete this application piece now that we've done the back end, wrapping in the front end. I'm going to be using Angular for that. Thankfully, that's also a topic, as awesome as it is, that others have done. People like Mark Roden, Mark Lusink, whose session at Connected was a complete hit with great reason. I'm going to try and show off a couple of the pieces they may not have touched on and hopefully help be beneficial in that capacity without overlapping too much on the basics of using it. If you've used any client-side framework or library pretty extensively, it should map relatively well to that, and I'll take a systematic approach like I have here. Since I started recording this, my latest post went live and includes information on everything you've just seen. It kind of capstones everything into one, and as you can see, I have a page and repository on GitHub with the master branch of my demo app here. So by all means, clone it, play with it. If you have questions, great ideas. There's this great thing called a pull request. It's every developer's best friend, because if other people can help you do the work and you may not know specifics, it opens the door for them to be able to assist. Thank you for watching. Have a great one.
And that's the demo. I really want to thank Eric for coming on the show. I really appreciate this topic. Maybe we can expand on that in the future or get him on for other topics. If you have any questions on that, please hit him up. And if you have any questions for me, here's my information, and I thank you for your time.